Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Meta Club. This week's race C is Daytona and it's Group 3, so you know the meta car is going to be something absolutely insane, but it is a different meta car than the last time we had this race combination. Let's get into it. Once again, the anti-meta car is the Corvette. With tons of power, amazing grip, and surprisingly nimble handling, the Corvette is the only thing that can almost match the Supra, and unfortunately, it can't actually match it. That's not to say it's impossible. This is an anti-meta guide, not necessarily an anti-meta car guide. So even though this car isn't quite as good as the Supra, I'm still going to give you the tools necessary to do really well in these races and maybe even win. The Toyota Supra has 98 of the top 100 times. The fastest anti-meta is a Corvette, and the second fastest is also a Corvette, which was my time at 143.7. That's only good for 65th place. The Supra is just incredibly dominant. This week is very tough for the anti-meta. As soon as the lap starts, align yourself with the wall on the right and look for this digital flag marker ahead. Just past that is this white line, and at the very end of that is when you're going to hit the brakes. Take advantage of the ABS by braking fully but steering slightly, aiming just to the left of the chevron signs in the distance. When you get to this corner of white lines intersecting right here, that's when you should downshift to second gear and start trail braking in. Your goal is to continue decelerating, trail braking in second gear, getting as close to these white tire barriers as you can, and then back up to third gear and on the throttle as soon as you pass them. Continuing to steer, you want to make sure you're not steering too much and you're not too heavy on the throttle because it can very easily make you slide. As you can see, I had to correct a slide right there, and if I had to do that while on the yellow curbing, I would have slid all the way off the track. Position yourself all the way on the left as soon as you can, straighten yourself up to align with the grass, and we're actually going to look for 3 different markers. Firstly is the pole on the left. Second is this mark on the ground, and third is the one sign that you see in the grass on the inside. I like to brake exactly at the mark on the ground, but that's very difficult to see when you're chasing people in the race, so make sure you know where it is in relation to the other marks. In second gear, after braking heavily, we want to turn in at that light post that we just passed on the left. We're going to continue trail braking, hitting a very late apex on the other side of the corner, and you want to get on the throttle in second gear, being very careful that you're not too heavy on the throttle and you're not steering too much. It's very easy to slide out here. Even continuing to the very exit of the corner when you're touching that yellow curb, you can very easily slide. Position yourself all the way on the right, and when you turn in here, continue steering so you align yourself on the left immediately. At this access road on the left, there's another marker on the ground, but once again, it's really difficult to see that when you're close to other cars, so you really need to make sure that you can reference where you are in the middle of the track just by your positioning with the rest of the track. You need to know where you are even if you can't see that exact mark. Brake fully down to third gear and don't start turning in until you're past the cones on the right. You want to trail brake gradually in, getting down to first gear, then popping it back up to third gear right as you exit all the way on the other side of the corner, and of course be very gentle on the throttle and be very gentle with your steering. You've got to make sure that you're using both in conjunction so you don't really surprise yourself with any kind of oversteer. For the next braking zone, I want you to aim your car slightly off the track so your right tires are pointed at the curb at the end of the access road just beyond those cones right there. Once you get to this crack in the ground right here, you're going to hit the brakes. And again, just like I said for the last 2 parts, you're not going to be able to see that when you're in the race itself. So make sure you know where that is and you know where your car is in reference to the other parts of the track. Brake heavily and patiently wait until you're at the end of the yellow curbing here before you start turning in and trail braking immediately. Braking lightly is both very helpful to get over the bumps as well as making sure that you're carrying enough momentum into this corner. As soon as you apex, you want to be in third gear on the throttle and you want to track out as much as you can. It's much better to get on the throttle super early and carry a lot of speed all the way to the wall than it is to carry a really tight line onto the oval. Anytime you're on the oval, you want to put your left tires on the yellow line. It's going to seem really bumpy and it might even seem like it's slowing you down, but it's the tightest line and you're not actually going to lose any kind of speed from it. Once you get to the straight, get yourself all the way to the outside of the track and align yourself as close to the wall as you can. After the 2 sign is a digital flag marker right here, and after that is a white line on the ground right here. At that white line, I want you to downshift to 5th, brake gently, and turn in at the 1 that's on the fence. You can use the grass by placing only your right tires on the yellow part of the curb there. I found it's important to come entirely off the brakes as you switch directions here before getting back on the brakes and downshifting to 4th. Keep your left tires on this side of the grass. Wait until your car rotates, then add throttle, trying to keep a tight line here and making sure that your left tires are touching the cement on the exit. Make sure you get all the way up on the oval before you hit that yellow line, and of course ride that yellow line just like the last part of the oval. Right now would be a good opportunity to talk about the shift point. As you can see, I just shifted at that little gray box on the digital display right where it shows the suggested gear that is almost never accurate, that's approximately where you want to shift for every gear of the Corvette. From here, it's a straight shot. You can even go in on the apron just a little bit, but either way, as long as you stay tight, you should have a good time. I frequently talk about really exact braking points and points of reference when it comes to doing the time trial, and a lot of the times you can really just treat each lap like it's a choreography, like you just want to do the exact same thing over and over again. But one of the biggest differences between people who are really good at time trial versus people who are good at time trial and race pace is that when you're in race pace, you can kind of sense when you are going a different speed or in a slightly different position, or if you have different grip because of tire wear or fuel usage. But either way, the reason I'm saying all this is there are a lot of markers on the ground on this track that I use, and a lot of times they're going to be impossible to see, and if you do look at them, if you can see them, chances are you're not going to be looking at the right place. So it's really important to kind of gather everything that you can see with your surroundings. Make sure that when you know exactly where you want to brake in time trial, you know relatively where you are compared to other landmarks that you see on the track. I talk about using manual a lot. I think most people who are competing in sport mode probably do use manual. If you're still on automatic, you probably already know that you're at a disadvantage in fuel races, but you're also at a disadvantage when it comes to driving certain cars. The Suzuki, for instance, you want to shift that at only 10% of the bar. The Corvette, it's about 75% of the bar. The Supra, it's a little bit more than that, except the final gear, it's different. But either way, you want to have full control, and it's not only for fuel usage and for controlling what gear you're in for corners, it can actually make the car go faster by shifting at the correct point. I recently talked to a few people who are adamant about not trying to do manual because it seems too daunting or like they don't have enough time. That makes sense, I get it, but you're definitely holding yourself back if you're not using manual, so I definitely encourage to spend any time you have trying to learn how to do that. But either way, good luck. I mentioned briefly earlier that the Supra is so incredibly powerful that it really does make it too formidable to go toe-to-toe with, even with the best anti-meta car, which is the Corvette. With that said, as I alluded to earlier, there are things that you can do strategically that can give you a better chance at winning the race, or at least doing good against the anti-meta. I too often get lost in the idea of trying to find an anti-meta car when I realize that we do have the resources of just trying to use a better strategy or some other tricky things that you can do to get a leg up on the competition. But for this race, I actually want to show you how incredibly powerful the Supra is and how difficult it is to defeat it. But in this race, I actually do end up with a pretty good position because our strategy, despite not being great, was good enough to defeat a lot of the Supras. After trying to say hi to all the friends in chat, the race got underway, and it was pretty cool. We had Key in front of us, who you probably know exactly who Key is. If you're watching my stream, you probably are very aware of him. He's a very big Gran Turismo YouTuber. And then Laporte in front of him is almost always just at the very top of the time trials. An incredibly, incredibly fast driver. Shout out to both those guys, as well as Lewis up at the front, and our friend Naked Ape. If I missed anyone else, oh, I'm realizing right now that Iceman started behind us. We know Iceman as well. Hi, Iceman. I didn't say hi to him at the beginning of the race. I apologize. Anyways, I'm rambling now. At the beginning of the races, you want to be really careful because stuff like that can happen. It gets really bunched up, especially if you're mixing anti-meta cars with the Supra, because the Supra is just, it's a crazy car. It's also kind of difficult to drive, and most of the anti-meta cars are going to be difficult to drive against the Supra for various reasons. So just be very careful on the outlap. That kind of stuff can happen. And at least we got some free positions for it. Now, right off the bat, I knew that Key was going to be faster than me, but I wanted to try to stay within his slipstream. But then I realized, of course, Laporte's in front of him, so if he's able to just stick with him, which will be a lot easier with them both in the meta car, it's going to be really difficult for me to stick with them unless I'm absolutely perfect. And guess what? I was not. I'd actually won a race in the anti-meta car earlier on when I was streaming, but it wasn't actually a good example of what this car can do against the meta car, and we're actually going to get into that towards the end of the video. But for now, we had to find ourselves in this race against some very fast drivers, and it was 3 a.m. It is actually currently 5 a.m., and I'm still working on this thing, but I'm determined to get it out. Anyways, I keep ranting. The gist of it is, I did not do a good enough job sticking with Key, which it turns out is very difficult in the anti-meta car in general, but he also had Laporte's slipstream. I don't know why I didn't choose to follow them into the pits. I really absolutely should have, but I saw a little bit of free air ahead. I didn't know if they were going to get caught up by slower drivers who also went in the pits, so I took the chance to just hopefully get clean air and run my best possible laps, which should be good enough against people who happened to be battling even in the meta car, and yeah, I took my chances. Jumping just to the oval portion of the track, everything was going well until this very moment. Now, the Pug, the VGT, is incredibly fast, but it's not quite fast enough on the infield, and against the Supra, it can pass it on a straight line, but then you have issues like this. Now, both of them did their best to drive really well, and I did my best to stay away from them. No one went off track, but that definitely slowed us down enough that when I went in the pits afterwards, I did not find myself anywhere near anyone else. Now, the chance of me actually finding myself close to Key and Laporte was pretty much slim to none, but I was hoping that they would get caught up and I'd be able to pull something off and end up in their slipstream. I really should have just gone to the pits when they did. Jumping out of the pits, it looks like they both just had a very clean and open lap. So what was less than a single second turned into over 2 seconds, so I wasn't going to get any kind of benefit from slipstream from them. Now, despite my insanely bad strategy call, my strategy itself, by itself, wasn't actually that bad. I went in early. I realized that I was faster than a lot of people on the track, so by avoiding having to battle with them, I was able to just run my laps, and if I was fast enough, I would end up in front of them after the pit cycle ended. As I was thinking about all of that, our friend Key unfortunately ended up spinning out. I'm not sure what happened, but I do know that I was now within slipstream range, but as I alluded to earlier, it was actually incredibly difficult just to stick with him even when he didn't have slipstream. For the next couple of laps, I was just about able to match his pace, staying within about a half second of him, but I'm going to go ahead and spoil this for you. I made a mistake, lost slipstream, and from then on, he just completely just walked away from me. There was nothing I could do to catch back up with him, no matter how well I was driving, and I was hitting pretty good laps for solo driving the Corvette. Jumping to the very end, when the pit cycle had fully completed, we found ourselves passing almost every one of the other Supras that had started ahead of us. The only people ahead of us now were Macho Monkey, Key, Laporte, and Lewis. And Lewis is actually also in the anti-meta car. Despite making a very big mistake while trying to chase Key, as well as making other mistakes and even getting a penalty at one point, starting in 15th place, I believe, I'm ending up in 5th place right here, and I did have enough pace to stay away from the Supra behind me. Like is usually the case, with races like this where there's a required pit stop but not a required tire compound change, the best thing you can do is pit when you don't have to worry about any kind of traffic. So if you don't see the people directly in front of you pitting, then you should pit, and if you do, then you probably shouldn't. But there is an exception because of the nature of this specific track. Since this track has such incredibly long full throttle sections, if you can find someone to slipstream with, even if you don't know them, then you can end up going much, much faster than you'd be able to go on your own. I've mentioned this before, but knowing a lot about your opponents is integral to having a really good race, and that's for a lot of reasons. One reason, of course, is if you know someone's not going to be clean, or if they're clumsy, you don't want to pass them on the outside, or if you know that you can trust people, then you can take the opportunity to pass them on the outside. But in races like this, if you know someone and you know they have similar pace to you, you can choose to bump draft them. Just run into the back of their bumper, using your slipstream to go faster, which will in turn make them go faster, which will in turn make you go even faster than that. If you aren't quite capable of bump drafting, or if you're not super comfortable with it, or if you're not sure that the person that you're racing with is super comfortable with it or would respond well to it, you could just choose to not battle people. Don't harass them. As you can see, Lewis is close, but he's not close enough to give me a bump draft just yet. But what he can choose to do is, as he approaches me, just do nothing. Don't go for a pass, don't position himself in a position that would make me think he's going to pass. He can just stay behind me and or even lift to give me extra space going to the corners, and that way I can just focus on getting my best pace. It's like there's no one around me, and then he can have the benefit of just running with me and running away from the pack essentially. Both of us are in 12th and 13th place, but we've already made our pit stop, which means we don't have to do anything except drive for the rest of the race, and there's no one even within 5 seconds of either of us here. Now, this type of thing isn't actually entirely altruistic. Lewis, if he hadn't got a penalty, would be right on my bumper at this point, and he'd have an opportunity to pass me, which I'm absolutely sure he would. By working together for 9 laps, or even 9.5 laps, we can make sure that we get as far away from the other drivers as possible, and then at the end, you can just choose to battle. So you can work your way back up, or back from any position, and then just choose to battle at the very end, making sure that you're very efficient, and that is how you can find 2 Corvettes at the top. But wait, there's actually more. If you can manage to find people that you're comfortable racing with and comfortable working with, then you can make pretty much anything work. In this race, I was in a Z4, which is absolutely not a competitive car, but our friend KP Wilcox, who is an incredibly fast driver in the meta car, just chose to push me around the entire track, the entire race. This is another race where I started from the back. This isn't even an anti-meta car. This is a pretty slow car, but because I had KP, a very fast driver, pushing the entirety of the race, and I was able to stay clean and drive fast on the infield, we won in the Z4. We were joking a lot in stream about the anti-meta actually just being friendship, but in reality, the social aspect of all of this can be used to your advantage to make anything work. I shouldn't say anything, but if we can win in the Z4, we can win in most cars. And that comes entirely because I had the advantage of being a streamer, of course, and I met KP because I stream, but it's not out of the question to become friends with people that you race with. I've become friends with lots of people I raced with even before I streamed, and if you simply send them a message, or if you just use the language of driving by communicating that you want to bump draft, then you can work together until the very end, and then whoever is faster at the end can take the win, and you can take second or first, however it works. By choosing to work with other people, you can defeat even an incomprehensibly fast meta car like the Supra. Of course, I had to have a meta car friend, but either way, having a friend or working with other drivers, being intelligent about your strategy can absolutely help you defeat any kind of meta car. Thank you very much for watching my video. If you like what you saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course I'll be making another one of these guides every single week. To finish off, we're going to leave you with a look at all of my current members. Thank you guys very much. I love every single one of you.